Lisa Hepburn. I work closely with Andy at MedStar Sports Medicine, and I have had the good fortune of working closely with U.S. Lacrosse, kind of as a liaison, to work with the staff at U.S. Lacrosse to try to understand what are some of the most pressing issues within the organization that we in the scientific community can help them get answers to. The science, especially in lacrosse, doesn't exist simply in an ivory tower. That this is practical research, this is research that we want to be directly able to affect the health and safety of the youth athlete, of the adult lacrosse player, and that you out today think of yourself as citizen scientists in that anybody can get engaged in this type of research. If you are engaged in the sport of lacrosse, you can contribute to understanding and helping with the research effort to make this sport safer and more enjoyable for everyone who's participating. So hopefully today you take away from some of this on how you can also be involved in some of this process. The backbone of a lot of the lacrosse research that we do is the injury surveillance, and this is where I think so many people can be involved in this because so often people are already collecting data on sports injuries and lacrosse injuries. What this does is this is where it all starts. You know, this is where we get the data to start making these decisions or recommendations on how the game is safer. We also use the injury surveillance data to try to understand what are the specific details, which players are at risk for a specific injury, how and when these injuries occur. And then we also, by having a baseline set of data, is how we can understand, did that rule change, that policy change, that new piece of equipment work? But we don't know that unless we have the data before we made that change. The other piece that we've already talked about a fair amount today is the equipment testing. So this is done often in the laboratory. They've been looking, creating standards, working with ASTM and informing NOCSI. We talked about the chest protector earlier today, and also the development of the women's headgear and looking at the men's helmet. This is something that is done often in the biomechanics lab, but people have been involved with this, the Sports Science and Safety Committee. Another area of individual research, when you're looking at the individual athlete, and this is a great profile piece on this in the latest version of the U.S. Lacrosse magazine at George Mason University Smart Lab, they show how they're putting the sensors on the athlete to look at individual motion. One of the issues that has come up recently is low back pain in the lacrosse athlete. So why low back pain? Is it the throwing motion, the twisting, rotational motion? What's going on? That's an individual athlete intervention, putting sensors on, mapping and understanding those motions can help us understand, is it an overuse injury? Is it a training issue? Is it something that we can change their biomechanics to prevent that from happening? So often I think as a sports governing body, U.S. Lacrosse is able to put out a lot of great new programs, and where we come in as scientists is often to help them show their effectiveness. There's many types of evaluation, whether it be implementation, are people actually taking this program and using it to the outcomes or the impact, and is it cost effective? Can people actually use that? So some of the examples of the program evaluation that we've been working on through the Sports Science and Safety Committee and external funding have been evaluating the effectiveness of the coaches education program. The Lax Prep program, many of you may be familiar with, which is the ACL risk reduction program. We built in an evaluation component into the end of the program, so we can immediately ask those who take the program, did you think you are adequately trained to teach this? We start asking those questions. We can then take those answers and make changes to the program, make it better, constant improvement, constantly evaluating, trying to make these programs better. Looking into doing evaluation with the lacrosse athlete development model, which is what Aaron spoke about earlier today. Where I think is a really hopefully interesting and exciting area where we have not had the opportunity to do a lot of research yet because it's probably one of the hardest areas to do, is looking at some of the policy evaluations when there are changes to the rules, especially in the sport of lacrosse. Rules are changed, and one of the most frequent questions that comes back to us as researchers is, well, okay, so we changed the rule on, we increased the number of minutes for penalties for a defenseless hit. Did it make the game safer? People want to know, you're making these rule changes, did they work? To do that, it's hard to answer, but that's the stuff we're trying to really work a little bit harder on. We're trying to get more information on, were penalties called, were penalties not called, in what situations? But in terms of policy evaluation and then also program policies, there's some new programs coming out with U.S. Lacrosse, the age verification program. Is that changing? Is that effective? Is it making the game better? That's kind of the root of all that's going on from the research side of U.S. Lacrosse right now.
Whoa.